Welcome to Fitchburg Senior Center. We're always happy to have you here. And again, you're always welcome here for Lunch and Learns. They're every first and third Wednesday of each month, and the topics vary. But this month, we're moving into something really special, Black History Month. And although we celebrated in February, it's an ongoing life learning experience. But today we're going to take a piece of that experience, that piece of that history, and talk about it and learn more about it. It's amazing how history helps you to understand just how much we don't know. Just how much we don't know about certain areas and certain things. And so today we have a representative from the Milton House Museum. And he's going to talk to us about Wisconsin, how Wisconsin played such an important role in the Underground Railroad and the connection to the Milton House, which is now the Milton House Museum. So I want to ask you to put your hands together and welcome the Program and Outreach Manager, Kevin Scannell, to share information.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? All right, I'm very happy to see so many faces here. It's great to see everyone super interested in this topic in Black History Month. Really happy to be here. How many people, by show of hands, have heard of the Milton House? Wow! All right, wow, that's great. We usually get a lot less people than that. How many people have visited the Milton House? A bit less, yeah. It is pretty far away. I'm not gonna lie. I had a nice long drive out here. My name's Kevin. I'm from the Milton House Museum, as you know. If you have any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'm happy to answer them, and then we will have a time for questions at the end if you would like to save your question as well. So, just going to quickly run through a few important dates as it relates to the Milton House itself. In 1839, the town of Milton was settled by Joseph Goodrich, who's the founder, and 9 others, 2 families. It was originally called Prairie du Lac, but when they submitted that name to the post office, it was actually rejected. And that's the only time I've actually heard of a post office name getting rejected. They said it was too similar to the town of Fond du Lac. So they had to come up with the name Milton. Now, does anyone have any guesses why it might be called the town of Milton? This is a tricky question, and we don't even know the answer for sure. All right, yes, so I heard someone's name. I heard someone say somebody's name. There's the poet John Milton. How many of you have heard of John Milton before? Yes, good number of hands. John Milton is the poet who wrote Paradise Lost and Paradise Found. So the theory is Milton was Paradise Found. I don't know if I believe that, though, but... So in 1844, Joseph Goodrich, after founding the town of Milton, he creates the Milton House Inn. I'll go back to the first slide. That's the picture of the Milton House. That's the Milton House Inn. It's a lovely hexagon shape. We are, as far as I know, the only building in the state of Wisconsin that is a hexagon shape. We have a few octagons, but we are the only hexagon. This inn itself, if you look at the hexagon, the second and third floor, you could rent out a room. It served as a hotel. In the 1800s, a lot of trains, a lot of stagecoaches, not any cars. So if you were waiting for a way to be transported around, you would end up waiting here at the Milton House. If you look along the sort of strip mall to the right, the extension of the hexagon, you'll see a lot of buildings. That was essentially the first strip mall in the United States. Those would be rented out, and people could set up their shops. They'd set up businesses throughout that. So we'd like to talk about that history. In 1861, we had the freedom seeker Andrew Pratt. I'll get back to that word freedom seeker in just a minute. But he is the person we like to talk about most with the history of the Milton House. And he came there in 1861 at the beginning of the Civil War. Fast forward about 80 years, significant portions of the Milton House actually collapsed. We like to talk about Milton. The Milton House is made of a unique mixture of a sort of lime, a sort of water. It creates sand. It's a new kind of concrete that was built. It lasted for about 100 years before collapsing, and it's about to be another 100 years, so make sure you visit the Milton House before that actually happens. But sorry, I'll go back. If you look, do you see that divider just to the right? That's the section that collapsed on the right. The left is still the original building, but the right is the section that collapsed. It happened overnight. 2 people were sleeping in the Milton House in that section when it collapsed, and a bit of a rude awakening falling through a floor. But they were both okay, fortunately. The Goodrich family, who ended up building the Milton House, they still owned it by 1948. The Milton Historical Society, which I currently work for, was formed to purchase the Milton House from the Goodriches, but while negotiations were happening, the building collapsed, and the Goodriches realized it would take a lot of money to repair it, so they ended up selling it for a grand total of $1. A pretty good investment, but at the same time, they had to spend quite a bit of money repairing it. 6 years later, the Milton House opened. By 1998, we received a National Historic Landmark designation. And in 2006, I'll go back to this picture one more time, that addition to the right was established. So for about 50 years, it was actually just the hexagon building and just that first block, and there was just open air right there. So we're very happy to have that extension added on. I want to run through some terminology really quickly. It's maybe not the most interesting part of the presentation, but this is also educational, and these are very important terms to be aware with. Underground Railroad. How many people have heard or know about the Underground Railroad? Yes, a lot of hands. I love to see that. So the Underground Railroad is, and I'll say these are the terms and definitions given by the National Park Service Network to Freedom, which we are a part of. The Underground Railroad is described as the resistance to slavery through escape and flight. If you remember, I referred to Andrew Pratt in 1861 when he came to the Milton House as a freedom seeker. And freedom seeker is a relatively new term. It's used to describe an enslaved person who takes action to obtain freedom from slavery. This is used in place of other words like a fugitive slave. We don't use slave anymore, and we don't use fugitive because that implies the doing of something wrong if someone is a fugitive. An enslaved person is the term we use now. In particular, that is the most common word we'll be using through this presentation, and that is to emphasize not only the humanity, it's still a person. Slave is dehumanizing, and the precursor word enslaved and emphasize that it's something done to someone. An enslaver is the one who enslaves. An abolitionist is someone who is opposed to slavery. A conductor is someone who is involved in moving freedom seekers along the Underground Railroad. A station master controls the different stations, which are the different stops on the Underground Railroad. Sorry, one more slide before I really get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. You can see that third picture at the bottom right, that there is our tunnel. If you can see, it's very well illuminated, and we'll be talking about that more later. I want to eliminate 2 common misconceptions we always get all the time about the Underground Railroad. This is one that school kids really struggle with, and that is that they actually believe there is a physical Underground Railroad that freedom seekers would take. And I know it sounds a bit funny, and I hate to admit, but I think until high school I also thought there was an actual physical Underground Railroad. But it's actually a really difficult myth for us to dispute. When we're talking about this history to school kids when they're on the tour, we have that underground tunnel part, as you can see in that bottom right picture. And we also have 20 feet from our front door, a railroad track. And it's a very heavily used railroad track. So all the times we're telling kids, there's not an actual underground tunnel, there's not an underground railroad, and then they're standing in the tunnel and hearing a train go by right over their heads. And they always think we're trying to pull a fast one, and I promise you, we're being honest. So not a physical underground railroad. The terminology for underground railroad, why is it called that? We don't know for sure. It's the first uses were in newspapers by paddy rollers who were trying to catch and return freedom seekers back to the South, and they kept commenting on how these freedom seekers were disappearing as if they were taking some sort of underground railroad. The next one is one that is maybe more commonly believed in your generation. How many people have heard of quilts playing some role on the Underground Railroad? Yes, lots of hands, yeah. As far as we know, there's no real evidence to suggest that. For those of you less familiar, there's a belief that different quilts would be hung up at different stations or safe houses along the Underground Railroad. A certain, and I don't have a specific example, but say you see a quilt and there's a moon, there's a moon on the quilt, and the moon would mean something like, oh, it's safe. You can stay here for the night. But something like a sun would mean, no, the safe house is being watched. You have to move onward. And I did make those examples up just now, but that's the same sort of idea. But there's not really much evidence to suggest that's the case. From everything we know about the Underground Railroad, it is this loose network of people throughout the United States who are protesting the institution of slavery. They're disagreeing with it, and they're helping enable, I should say, freedom seekers make their way out of bondage, essentially. So because it's this loose network, it's only people. If I'm Joseph Goodrich of the Milton House, I might know who is sending these freedom seekers to the Milton House, and I might know where they're going. But outside of that, I don't really have any idea who the following stops are after that. And it's in everyone's interest for that, because if someone gets caught, and we're going to talk about that later, especially following 1850, it is better to know as little as possible so that the whole network of the Underground Railroad is preserved. So the idea that there's this massive understanding of everyone in the United States except for the South on what these quilts mean is somewhat far-fetched. Now we're going to talk about the Underground Railroad itself a little bit more. So I guess, as I just mentioned, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Underground Railroad was a loose network of peoples and places that aided freedom seekers. It is houses like the Milton House. It's also, other places, it could be someone's shed. It could be a church. Churches were decently common as well. And it operated from 1619 to 1865. Now, another question for you all. Can I get a hand? Someone who knows what significance the date 1619 means here. Yes.
Yeah. Who, me?
Yes, sorry, I don't know names yet, unfortunately.
1619 was the, it's the recorded date of which a Dutch ship brought some enslaved people from Africa.
Yes.
Some people are saying that should be, instead of counting America from 1776, it's counted from 1619.
Yes, so for those of you who didn't get that, fantastic work. That is the recorded date of the first enslaved people really brought to the Americas. And can I get another hand? 1865. Did anyone know the significance of 1865 in this? Yes.
Would that be the Emancipation Proclamation?
That would almost, very close. Sorry, a hand back there.
1863.
I didn't hear what he said.
Oh, no, did you have the...
I thought it was the Emancipation.
No, so the Emancipation Proclamation was 1863. 1865 is the end of the Civil War and the 13th Amendment with the abolition of slavery. So when we look at what 1619 to 1865 means, that is the recorded beginning of slavery in the United States and the end of slavery in the United States, with a small asterisk on the end of slavery. So when we talk about, the Underground Railroad, for the most part, we consider its heyday when it was most popular, when it was moving the most freedom seekers around the United States. It's not so much in 1619, but obviously as an institution, when slavery has existed, there have always been people attempting to escape from slavery, and therefore the Underground Railroad itself has existed since the beginning of enslavement in the United States. So, and maybe this next point could be on the misconceptions, but the Underground Railroad actually ran in both the North and South of the United States. All the time we get people visiting us and saying, I can't believe, there's an Underground Railroad site in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a free state. Why is this needed? And I'll talk about that a little more in the next slide, but for the most part, there wasn't much freedom even in the North. And I'll also mention not only did the Underground Railroad operate from south to north, but it also operated from south to even further south. Mexico, when it became independent in, I want to say, the 1840s, I'm unfortunately not up to date on my Mexican history, but they abolished slavery when they became an independent state. So you would also have freedom seekers escape from the Texas areas into Mexico, and even Florida as well. There were some maroon colonies established in the swampland-ish areas of Florida. And it was essentially consisting of freedom seekers who established their own communities where they themselves abolished slavery in the United States, which is, I think, really interesting to learn about as well. So after 1850, and again, I'll talk about this on the next slide, I promise, the only way to leave the United States the only way to truly be safe if you were a freedom seeker was to leave the United States. So why is that? Well, in 1846, the United States declared war on Mexico. If you remember the Alamo, don't forget it. Until 1848, at the end of the Mexican-American War with the Treaty of Guadalupe, what was in the treaty was the United States got a lot more territory. Mexico seceded their control of Texas, and I promise all of this is very much relevant to the Underground Railroad. The United States also received a lot more territory, modern-day California, modern-day New Mexico, Arizona, all part of the New Mexico territory. Utah territory was established as well, which is modern-day Utah and I think the southwest corner of Wyoming. And all of this gets added to the United States. And now why this is really important for the U.S. is it really leads to the Civil War. So in 1850, Congress is trying to grapple with the question of whether or not these new territories, whether or not they should be free or slave states. And so out comes the Compromise of 1850, which says multiple things. It says, for one, California is now a free state. California enters as a free state. However, before the Compromise of 1850, there's an equal number of free and slave states in the United States. So to balance this, Congress now has to make it unbalanced, but California, while it's a free state, they do have to send one senator who is pro-slavery and one senator who is opposed to slavery in order to keep the to keep the Senate still balanced. And then the other main part of the Compromise of 1850 is the Fugitive Slave Law or Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And this is why following 1850, the Underground Railroad becomes much more popular, it becomes much more relevant, and it means that sites in Wisconsin now have much more usage. So what the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 really does is it says if you were caught in the North or South aiding or assisting any freedom seeker, you could be penalized with jail time or you would be fiscally held accountable. And whenever you hear the concept of the Civil War being fought about states' rights, There's sort of an irony in that because the popular answer is states' rights over what? And while that's true, it was states' rights over slavery. So something that's more hypocritical is when states were seceding from the United States and joining the Confederacy, one of the things they cited was that there was not enough federal enforcement over the fugitive slave law. Wisconsin, as a state in particular, was called out, and states were saying in the Confederacy, look, the government's not being federally enforcing of the fugitive slave law. Look at Wisconsin, they're just completely ignoring this. So the whole states' rights argument doesn't really hold much fruit. So because the fugitive slave law of 1850 is included in the Compromise of 1850, it now makes it so you can't really be safe in the free states following then. So now Wisconsin, people could kind of stay there before 1850, but now they do have to escape out to Canada, which is currently, and I say currently, part of the British territories, but the British territories had abolished slavery as well by this point. And so following 1850, this is the height of the operation of the Underground Railroad. It's now expanded even further into the north, and secrecy was more relevant than ever. The Joshua Glover incident is one we like to talk about a lot. Joshua Glover was a freedom seeker in 1852 who escaped from bondage in Missouri and traveled up and stayed in Racine, just south of Milwaukee. And he lived there from 1852 to 1854. And he made the unfortunate mistake of telling someone he believed was a friend, and keep in mind this is following the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act. He made the mistake of telling someone he believed was a friend that he was formerly enslaved, and he had escaped enslavement 2 years prior and was living in Wisconsin. And that friend immediately turned him in to the authorities, and they arrested him, and they brought him to jail. It was late at night. They brought him up to the Milwaukee jail. And they said in the morning, we're going to send you back to Missouri. But as tragic as that story is, the people and friends he knew and abolitionists in Racine did not let that happen. That night they had, around 100 or so people march on the Milwaukee jail, and they essentially busted him out of jail, held the sheriff at gunpoint, and had an armed escort. And several days later, they got him on a boat across the lake into Canada, and he lived there for the rest of his life. So yes, question.
It's part of Milwaukee law where I'm from. Waukesha, the next county over, what was a hotbed of abolitionists. In fact, they had so much news coming out. He had a pamphlet, and the pamphlet was called the Waukesha Freeman. The Waukesha Freeman exists as a newspaper to this day because it got to be so popular. But what they also did is that they marched from Waukesha to Milwaukee, and they formed, it was called Watertown Plank Road, and they walked all the way down there, and they helped bust him out, and they got him up to Canada because, like I said,
Thank you. So that's the Joshua Glover incident, and it's a nice story to tell. But it also shows the significance of the Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act, of how even in a very progressive sort of state in terms of abolitionism that Wisconsin is, he still wasn't safe there and had to continue onwards towards Canada. Briefly, just going to talk about the Goodrich family who built the town of Milton and the Milton House, because that's where we're from. That's why it's relevant. They came here from New York. They had 2 children, Ezra and Jane Goodrich, and founded the town of Milton and founded the Milton College. Something we like to highlight is they were Seventh-day Baptists. Milton is one of the largest Seventh-day Baptist communities in the world, actually, I believe. And one thing about the Seventh-day Baptists is they are they're temperate, so no drinking, no smoking, which made the town of Milton very boring in its very early days. But they were also, you not only had to be opposed to slavery, you had to be an abolitionist, but you had to actively be making strides in order to abolish slavery. And that's why we think the Seventh-day Baptist community in Milton itself made Milton a sort of safe haven, but also why Joseph Goodrich was involved on the Underground Railroad. So that is if you can see, a very nice cinematic picture of our underground tunnel again. It's a bit dark, but this is where we really start talking about abolitionism and the Milton House in particular. So, as I just said, Seventh-day Baptist religion very relevant as to the Underground Railroad. Milton College was also built by Joseph Goodrich, so a relatively progressive town in terms of college. And then the Wide Awakes. How many have heard of the Wide Awakes? Yes, that is about as expected. The Wide Awakes were a sort of small, political organization of mainly young men in the 1850s is what they're most known for. And they helped get Abraham Lincoln elected because they believed he would abolish slavery. And if you've ever heard, how many of you have heard of your grandchildren use the word woke? Yes, a lot of that. This is actually where we believe the term woke comes from, is from the Wide Awakes. So next time you hear that, you can drop a fun little fact on them. So I'm actually going to run back to the very first slide here, because we have a nice picture of the Milton House. So do you see just to the bottom left of the picture, past the hexagon of the Milton House, a small wooden cabin down there? How many of you see that? Yes? Yes. So that there is the actual first building that the Goodriches lived in before they constructed the Milton House. And that's actually where we believe the freedom seekers were first brought in. So under the cover of night, we have multiple families who have accounted that freedom seekers would be brought in by wagon, hidden in the wagon, and funneled sort of into that cabin. And then I'll go back to where I was. From that cabin, they would be taken through the tunnel into the basement of the hexagon, into the root cellar. And what you can see the cabin there, you can see the tunnel there. That's where they went. It connected from a secret trap door in the log cabin to the root cellar. And yes, so we do have one person that we know for sure. His name is Andrew Pratt. He was a freedom seeker in 1861. Again, following the Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act, it makes it very difficult for us to collect names of actual freedom seekers and people involved along the Underground Railroad. That's why it's also so difficult for different historical sites to gain recognition as part of the Network to Freedom, because it's very much a crime now, and it's something that would be prosecuted. So people aren't often writing, self-incriminating evidence of, I was involved in the Underground Railroad. I was helping these freedom seekers coming through. And it also puts the freedom seekers at risk and in danger if you have that sort of thing in writing. But we do have Andrew Pratt. In 1861, he escaped from Missouri as well, and ended up staying in Milton. We have a diary entry by Ezra Goodrich, Joseph Goodrich's son, and he says that Andrew Pratt was formerly enslaved and was cared for in the Underground Passage. And that small scrap of paper, which is half ripped and from his diary, is actually why we have, in part, national recognition as a historic site. So that's what we know about Andrew Pratt. He wrote a letter to the governor of Wisconsin in 1863, and in that letter, he essentially asks, look, I'm formerly enslaved. This is after the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, so very much publicly the Civil War is about ending slavery. So he says, why is it that I'm forcibly, drafted into the war, right? I have to sign up for the draft, but I'm not allowed to enlist and receive the bounty. White soldiers were allowed to enlist in the Civil War and receive a bounty, which meant they would receive payment for fighting in the Civil War. But Andrew Pratt says, as a black man, I'm not entitled to that. And why is that? And the governor, he does respond to the letter to his credit, but he sort of he's and haws and doesn't really give an answer. And Andrew Pratt is left disappointed, and he did not actually enlist in the army. But we do know he stayed in Milton until 1864. We think the reason he didn't go on towards Canada is, even though it's, again, after 1850, that all-important date, is because the Civil War was going on. So odds are someone from the South isn't really going to take the time to come up and try and bring him back. So 1 second, sorry. So in 1864, right before he leaves, Andrew Pratt is involved in some sort of, I'll let you read the word there. Imbroglio is Italian for a sort of ultimate embarrassment. It's an incident. And Ezra Goodrich writes the, quote, the Negro imbroglio, essentially attacking the leaders of Milton, because the two of them, Andrew Pratt and Ezra Goodrich, were both involved in a fraternal organization, the Good Templars Lodge of Milton. And this was a group around, I think, 75 or 100 or so. And they're both involved. And three men, basically in the middle of the night, show up to Andrew Pratt's house, his front door, and they say, look, we just finished talking to everyone else in the lodge, and they all want you out. So you should resign and withdraw from the lodge. That conversation did not happen. The majority of people did not want Andrew Pratt out of the lodge. It was mainly just these three men. The leader of the men actually writes in a letter to his father, who's also involved, and he says, I'm all for abolishing slavery, but I'm not in favor of equality, and I don't want to be associated with Andrew Pratt and in the same organization as him. It's a whole fiasco because not only is it just blatantly racist, but they're lying to Andrew, and other people find out, and they start moving around meeting dates and fudging numbers and stuff. And eventually they say, okay, Andrew Pratt, you can stay in, but by the end of this, he just wants to be out. He just wants to not be involved with a group of people who are as hostile to him as they are. So he ends up moving to Minnesota and stays there for the rest of his life. He ends up marrying a Norwegian immigrant, and they have several kids together. Interestingly, and I like to mention this, he ends up leaving money to and land to his daughters, which was a very uncommon practice for the time. So we do like to mention that. And the story of Andrew Pratt is somewhat of a heartwarming one. I like to think of a man who was born into bondage and then ended up essentially as a landholding free man in Minnesota. So. This is a picture of the Milton House on the left. This is probably my favorite picture. I'm going to run up and show. If you look, if you remember blocks 3 and 4 collapsed, I'm going to run up and show that real quick. I don't know how well people can hear me, but it is these 2 blocks here. Those are the 2 blocks that collapsed. On the right is block 5. On the left of that is block 2. They were damaged as well, which is why they had to be demolished as well. Again, the only thing remaining is the section on the right until 2006, and since 1954, when it was officially repaired and reopened, it became a public museum. And we are, in fact, the only nationally certified Underground Railroad site in the state of Wisconsin that is open to public tours. That's a mouthful, and I do have to practice that in the mirror sometime, but it means you should come and tour the Milton House. So how can you experience the Milton House? You can come for a tour. You can join us. We have lots of special events going on. We have our own guest speakers. They're all much better than I am. So if you're interested, you should definitely come check it out. We have a Living Civil War History Day I want to say, on May. It's the third weekend of May. We have a bunch of reenactors come and stand. And they live in the park and the surrounding territories, and they're all in Civil War uniform, and they all have authentic Civil War stuff. It's really fun. There's cannon firings. It's great. We're also very much trying to get more and more involved in schools. We have a lot of projects going on there, different ways to bring the museum to schools. Busing is getting more and more expensive right now, so finding a way to actually bring the history of the Underground Railroad, bring the history of Black history, and the Milton House itself to schools that can't afford busing is one of our key initiatives that we're trying to work on right now as well. Additional ways to support the museum: you can become a member. You get some perks. You get free admission. All this information is on our website. You can donate. You can volunteer your time. All of our tour guides are fantastic. They're the ones who give the tours of the Milton House itself. And then if you're on social media, if you're on Facebook, you can follow us and learn about all the cool things we're doing and all the fun history we like to talk about. So I'm going to finish with this short quote. No one needed a ticket to ride on the Underground Railroad, just a deep desire for freedom. So thank you all very much for having me today. If you have any questions, I'm here all day if you need to talk to me and you have any questions. So thank you very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure. So. Yeah. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and I'd be happy. Yes, I see one at the back.
Hi, I'm just curious as the name changed and how that came about. Instead of slaves, freedom seekers.
Yes. So again, all of the terminology we get is from the National Park Service. I don't know exactly when they made that change itself. But again, so slave, we don't use that term anymore as it's very dehumanizing. And freedom seeker is the term we use instead of a fugitive slave, because fugitive implies a wrongdoing. We also, again, don't use the term slave anymore. So freedom seeker is just someone who is essentially seeking freedom. So it's the more, I guess, appropriate term that they've decided upon. So yes. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Did you happen to bring any brochures with you?
The question was, did I bring any brochures? Unfortunately, I did not. I can leave my business card. I can leave any additional information, some website information if you'd like. You can come up to me after, and I'd be happy to talk to you. So, yes.
If so, how is the Milton House connected to the Tomlin House?
Yes, so, go on. Sorry. So the question was, how is the Milton House connected to the Lincoln Tallman House, which is in Janesville, about a 15-minute drive from the Milton House? They're not super connected. The Tallman House, I think they like to think they have some connection to the Underground Railroad, when in reality they don't really so much. Something they talk about is, they have a window with some lights and some stained glass on it, and they say this could have been used. I think it goes back to the same sort of quilt argument or quilt story of how quilts were used. As far as we know, there's not really any history to indicate that Lincoln Tallman House had any involvement on the Underground Railroad. But outside of that, the Lincoln Tallman House is a very interesting historic building, and if you haven't been and you're ever in that area, I highly recommend visiting us first, but then them second. Yes?
How they ever took it, take place on the Underground Railroad?
What'd you say, sorry?
Ever took?
Harriet Tubman.
Oh, well, what about Harry
Why
Tubman?
did you play in the underground?
Yeah, so what part did Harriet Tubman play in the Underground Railroad? The answer is pretty much everything. She is far and away the most famous person on the Underground Railroad. Yep.
I know you didn't mention her name, that's why I wondered why.
Yeah, no, so why didn't I mention her name? Harriet Tubman is responsible for far and away more, assistance on the Underground Railroad than anyone else in the United States, and I don't think it's even close. I don't know who's second, but I think she was responsible for over 100. So why didn't I mention her name? That's a perfectly fine question. I'm mainly focusing on the town of Milton in Wisconsin, and she was East Coast, sort of Massachusetts, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, along that area more so. But that's perfectly fine. I also, if I included Harriet Tubman, I'd be up here for another 2 hours just talking about all the things that she did. So, yes.
Okay, just that back. I just want to know why, no problem.
Oh, no, yeah, fine. Yeah, you.
The use of the Underground Railroad continues to this day. In fact, the Marvel on TV, the mutants were being hunted in America, so they had an Underground Railroad to help the mutants get away. And what they did, they went down into Mexico from there, and the whole thing was based on Atlanta. So the Underground Railroad exists to this day.
I don't know if anyone heard that. You were projecting well, yeah. No, it's fine. I can't repeat that. That was too good. So, anyone else have any questions? Or? No? All right. I'll be here for another bit if you want to come up and talk to me after, and I'll turn it over to Janice now here in just a second.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and that was quite a history lesson, wouldn't you say? Yeah, quite a bit. And as I said earlier, history helps you to understand what you don't know. And today was really helpful in understanding some of that stuff. So I appreciate you being here and sharing your thoughts and your history with us. And I certainly want to thank all of you for being here. A special thanks to MTZ Charitable, to other friends in Dane County that have come out today. But I want to also extend to you guys an open invitation to always come out to Fitchburg Senior Center, where you're welcome. So I appreciate you being here. One thing I want to share with you, we have some new programs coming, and one is the urban line dance with T.J. Jackson. I know some of you probably know her. She's one of the great instructor. But it'll start in March, and it's on Saturdays. And there's some flyers on the as you go out. So grab a couple of that information. And we certainly love to have you come, and share that urban line dance with us to jazz, hip hop, and R&B music and what have you. So please share your thoughts with us. Come back, and another big round of applause for Kevin.